In 2022, Philadelphia police announced they were using cutting-edge genetic genealogy to solve the boy in the box case. The same techniques that identified the Golden State Killer were being applied to DNA extracted from the child's remains in 1957. For the first time in 67 years, investigators believed they were close to learning the identity of the 4-year-old boy found dead in Fox Chase. But the results would raise more questions than answers. If you're fascinated by cold cases where modern science meets decades-old mysteries, make sure to subscribe, because this investigation represents the cutting edge of forensic genealogy. February 25, 1957. College student Frank Guthrum was checking muskrat traps along Susquehanna Road in the Fox Chase section of Philadelphia. The area was rural then, wooded and isolated, popular with hunters and trappers seeking quiet spots away from the city. Around 3 p.m., Guthrum spotted something unusual in a small clearing about 15 feet from the road. A large cardboard box, partially concealed by underbrush, sitting in a depression that suggested it had been there for some time. What he found inside would haunt Philadelphia for the next 67 years. The body of a young boy, estimated between 4 and 6 years old, wrapped in a blue and white flannel blanket. The child appeared to have been dead for several weeks, possibly months. He showed signs of severe malnutrition and had been brutally beaten before death. But what disturbed investigators most was the care taken with the body after death. The child had been recently bathed, his fingernails trimmed, his hair cut in a crude bowl style. Someone had wrapped him carefully in the blanket before placing him in the J.C. Penney bassinet box. Philadelphia police responded immediately. Detective Sam Weinstein took charge of what would become the department's longest-running unsolved case. The scene provided limited evidence. The box had contained a blue bassinet when purchased, suggesting the killer might have had an infant or been preparing for one. The flannel blanket showed a distinctive pattern that investigators hoped someone would recognize. An autopsy revealed the extent of the child's suffering. Dr. Joseph Spellman determined the boy had been systematically abused over an extended period. He showed signs of chronic malnutrition, old healed fractures, and evidence of prolonged neglect. The immediate cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. But the child's overall condition suggested he had lived in circumstances of severe abuse and deprivation. Most puzzling was his appearance. The recent haircut and bathing indicated someone had cared enough to clean him up after death. Yet that same person had apparently tortured him while alive. Philadelphia police launched one of the largest missing persons investigations in the city's history. They checked every missing child report filed in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, and Delaware for the previous year. None matched the boy's description. Photographs of the child were distributed to police departments, social services agencies, schools, and hospitals throughout the region. The images were published in newspapers, shown on early television news programs, and posted in public places. The response was overwhelming but unproductive. Hundreds of tips poured in, but none led to positive identification. Several families came forward claiming the child was their missing relative, but in each case, dental records or other evidence ruled out the connection. If you're finding this case as compelling as investigators did, don't forget to hit that subscribe button for more mysteries that have challenged law enforcement for decades. One of the earliest promising leads came from a foster mother who contacted police claiming the boy matched a child who had been removed from her care months earlier. But when social services checked their records, they found the child in question was alive and accounted for in another placement. The case attracted national attention when America's Most Wanted featured it in 1998, 41 years after the discovery. The program generated hundreds of new tips, but again, none provided the breakthrough investigators hoped for. Perhaps the most significant early lead came from a psychiatric patient who claimed detailed knowledge of the boy's death. The woman provided information that hadn't been released to the public, including specific details about the child's injuries and the circumstances of his abandonment. However, her credibility was questionable due to her mental health issues, and she later recanted parts of her story. Investigators could never corroborate her claims with physical evidence. In the 1960s, The case gained renewed attention when criminologist Dr. Remington Bristow became obsessed with solving it. Bristow spent years investigating every aspect of the case, creating detailed charts of evidence, and following up on hundreds of tips. His most controversial theory involved a nearby foster home that had housed children with developmental disabilities. Bristow believed the boy might have been a resident who died under suspicious circumstances, with his death covered up to avoid scrutiny of the facility. But despite extensive investigation, no evidence supported this theory. Records from the foster home showed all residents accounted for, and former employees denied any knowledge of missing children. The 1970s brought advances in forensic science that offered new hope. Fingerprint technology had improved, and investigators began using computer databases to cross-reference evidence. The boy's fingerprints were compared against millions of records in FBI databases, but no matches were found. This suggested he had never been processed through any official system, never been fingerprinted for school enrollment or social services. DNA technology emerged in the 1990s, offering the most promising investigative tool yet. In 1998, Philadelphia police exhumed the boy's remains to extract genetic material for analysis. The DNA profile was entered into the combined DNA index system, where it could be compared against samples from unidentified remains, missing persons cases, and criminal databases across the country. But again, no matches were found. The case entered the digital age with its own website, maintained by retired Philadelphia Police Captain Tom Augustine, who had worked the investigation for over 40 years. Augustine's dedication to the case became legendary within law enforcement. He kept the boy's photograph on his desk throughout his career, showing it to every detective, social worker, and community member he encountered. Social media brought new attention to the case. Facebook groups dedicated to solving the boy in the box mystery attracted thousands of members, sharing theories, analyzing evidence, and keeping public interest alive. In 2016, Philadelphia police created a dedicated cold case unit with advanced technological resources. The boy in the box became one of their priority investigations. Detective Ray Evers, who now leads the investigation, began applying genetic genealogy techniques that had revolutionized cold case work nationwide. The method involves using DNA from crime scenes to identify distant relatives, then building family trees to narrow down potential identities. This approach had solved cases decades old, including the identification of the Golden State Killer in 2018. If successful, it could finally answer the question that had puzzled investigators for over 60 years. Who was this child? In early 2022, Philadelphia police announced a major breakthrough. Genetic genealogy had identified potential family members related to the boy in a box. For the first time, investigators believed they were close to learning his identity. But the results created unexpected complications. The genetic analysis suggested the child might have been of mixed racial heritage, a possibility that hadn't been considered in 1957 when racial categories were more strictly defined. This revelation forced investigators to reconsider their assumptions about the case. Had racial prejudice affected the original investigation? Were there communities that hadn't been properly canvassed for missing children? More troubling, the genetic genealogy pointed toward a family that had no record of missing children. Every potential relative identified through DNA analysis accounted for their family members during the relevant time period. The breakthrough that promised answers instead raised new questions. If the boy belonged to this genetic lineage, how had he become separated from family members who showed no awareness of his existence? In December 2022, Philadelphia police announced they had tentatively identified the boy in the box as Joseph Augustus Zarelli, a 4-year-old who would have been living in West Philadelphia at the time of his death. But even this identification brought complications. City records for Joseph Augustus Zarelli were incomplete, making it difficult to verify his identity conclusively. The family members identified through genetic genealogy had no memory of this child, raising questions about whether he had been given up for adoption, placed in foster care, or somehow separated from his biological family. The announcement generated significant media attention and public interest. Philadelphia police received hundreds of new tips, but most focused on the newly released name rather than providing information about the child's life or death. Detective Evers emphasizes that the identification, while promising, remains tentative. Forensic genealogy is a complex process that requires careful verification through multiple sources. The case has also highlighted ethical questions about genetic genealogy. Some privacy advocates worry about using DNA databases to identify individuals who never consented to genetic analysis. But for investigators, the potential to finally solve a 67-year-old case justifies the advanced techniques. The boy in the box has become a symbol of Philadelphia's commitment to never abandoning victims, even decades after their deaths. Today, the child known as America's unknown child rests in Ivy Hill Cemetery under a headstone purchased by donations from Philadelphia citizens. The inscription reads, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." Visitors regularly leave flowers, toys, and handwritten notes at the grave. Many express hope that someday his real name will be added to the memorial. The case has influenced missing persons investigations throughout the United States. The extensive public outreach, the preservation of physical evidence, and the decades-long commitment to finding answers have become models for other cold case investigations. Modern missing children protocols, including Amber Alerts and rapid response systems, owe much to lessons learned from cases like the boy in the box where delayed identification allowed crucial evidence to disappear. The investigation also demonstrates how forensic science continues evolving. Techniques that seemed impossible in 1957 are now standard procedure. Each advancement in DNA analysis, facial reconstruction, and database management brings new hope for solving old cases. Philadelphia police continue receiving tips about the boy in the box. Some focus on the tentative identification of Joseph Augustus Zarelli, while others propose alternative theories about his identity and death. Detective Evers maintains an open mind about all possibilities. Despite the recent genetic genealogy results, he acknowledges that final confirmation of the child's identity may require additional evidence. The case reminds us that some mysteries persist across generations, challenging each new cohort of investigators to apply their skills and technology to age-old questions. But it also demonstrates the power of persistence. 67 years after that college student found a cardboard box in the woods, Philadelphia police continue working to give this child his name back. If you're captivated by cases where cutting-edge science meets historical mysteries, make sure you're subscribed for more investigations where every technological advance offers new hope for justice. The boy in the box case proves that some questions are too important to abandon, and that sometimes the most meaningful victories come not from solving cases quickly, but from never giving up on the victims who deserve answers. Whether he was Joseph Augustus Zarelli or remains forever unknown, this child has touched thousands of lives and changed how America searches for missing children. His legacy lives on in every investigation that refuses to close, every database that preserves evidence, and every detective who keeps an old photograph on their desk, waiting for the day when science finally reveals the truth.